Day, go to Sunday school. Hey, did you bring that chair in here? Did you bring that chair in here? Uh, all right. We're going to go ahead and get started. Told you we were going to switch things up for a couple of weeks. We've been doing avoiding confusion. We're going to switch it up for a couple of weeks. So we're going to talk about really just basically relationships in church, right? And the importance of them. And so church is obviously more than filling a seat, right? Most of us kind of understand that. One of the reasons that we kind of switched up what we were doing for our midweek, right? Went to kind of doing a home-based thing and a little bit more discussion-style format, and even right, we've been kind of trying to do that with Sunday school, right? With asking questions and trying to, right, basically inspire discussion, and that is because there is more to church than just filling right 24 to 36 inches of a chair. This is really right. We're supposed to connect here, right? There's supposed to be more to it than that. So, if you've ever used an old school barbecue, right, with coals, right, the big bags of coal that you buy at the store. You pour that in there, right? You put lighter fluid on it, whatever, right? It all gets hot. As long as those coals are together, they all glow, right? But if you take tongs and you take one of those pieces of coal out and set it off to the side, it doesn't take long and it gets cold, right? It stops glowing, and eventually, right, you're still left with some coal in there, but it's not doing its job anymore, right? It's not going to heat anything. And that's what happens in two ways, right? It happens obviously when you pull yourself out of church, but it can happen in the church too, right? It happens while you're sitting in a pew, right? You can do the same thing to yourself while you're sitting in a church service, just by basically not associating with the church, right? You come, you hear the message, you walk out, and right, basically everything is kind of the same, right? And so it's right, the old adage of feeling lonely in a crowded room, right? You can be lonely at church just like you can be lonely at home by yourself. The same thing can happen. And so it comes because we disconnect ourselves, right? Church is we're supposed to build actual, like, real strong, like, bonds, relationships, right? Our faith is supposed to inspire the faith of others, right? And so, but a lot of people, it's real easy, right, to isolate yourself even in a crowd, because you don't want to get too close to anybody, because if you get too close to anybody, then somebody might realize that you got problems. Right? And you don't want people to know that you got problems, or you don't want them to know what problems you have, right? Because we all talk the same, right? Well, I got problems, right? But when we say that, we're really it's pretty general, right? Yeah, well, everybody on the face of the planet has problems, right? But we want to keep everybody away from us, because if they find out what our problems are, then they may not think too highly of us, right? Most of us are scared of what church people will do to us if they ever find out what our problems are, right? We are famous in Christianity, a little less so in some of the more recent generations than others, but we are famous, right, for shooting our own wounded, right? Not only do we will bury our own wounded, right? Before they even stop breathing, we've got them buried. And so, but that's not what church is supposed to be, right? Church really is, right? It's a call to actual fellowship, right? Going all the way back, Acts chapter 2, verse 42, right? He tells you in Acts 2:42, right? They continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship and in breaking of bread and in prayer, right? So the early Christians church was not a weekly event for early Christians. It was life for early Christians. Right? This is I don't know, I can't say modern times, right? Because it's kind of been that way even just kind of growing up. But church, it became a series of events that you attend. There's no actual like connection between people in church. There's no real bonds between them, right? Which is why people can go from church to church to church to church to church, right? Every time that they get upset about something that happens at church, or something that's said at church, or the way that somebody at church made them feel, right? They can just pull up roots and move right along. And really, nothing in their Christian life changes. Right? There's no trauma. There's no devastation from it. I mean, they can just basically, they can uproot and they can go right to the next church and nothing ever change. It's kind of like this, right? We all, you go to watch a movie, right? Most of us sitting in here, we have a favorite theater that we go to watch a movie, right? Because we like the seats there, or we like the soda, or maybe the popcorn, whatever. But that's our favorite theater to go to. But the movie's the same whether you go to that theater or another one, right? And you may be a little less comfortable in the next theater, but there's no difference, right? And that's the way that a lot of people, right? And I would say, right, even some of us sitting in this room, right, that's the way church is for us. What's the difference between here and anywhere else? Right? And you say, well, the message is no different. Well, it's not the message that's supposed to change. If that's all we've got that binds us together, right, is just, well, the message is the same. Well, the message is virtually the same a lot of places. Right? Even as narrow a niche as we as so-called independent fundamental Baptists, even as narrow a niche as we fit into, there's a lot of independent fundamental Baptist churches in this area, right? So what makes this different for you, right? Listen, the scripture, the way the scripture puts it is steadfastly, right? Which means it was a consistent, continual thing. They were serious, right? They were serious about learning what the disciples, the apostles in this case, right? They were serious about learning what the apostles were teaching. But beyond that, right? They were fellowshipping together and breaking bread together. They were spending time together, like not in this room. Right? These people were a part of each other's lives. Right? They prayed together. It wasn't, I don't think that the early church, right? I don't think the apostles stood up in the early church and said things like, hey, this coming Sunday, right, is Easter Sunday, and we're going to have dinner on the grounds, so we can't wait to have you join us for dinner on the grounds. I don't think that that's what it means when it says that they spent time steadfastly together, right, in breaking bread and fellowship. I don't think that's what it was talking about. I think it was talking about scheduled church events, right? Listen, fellowship was a part of their everyday lives. It wasn't programmed. Right? It was personal connections. Listen, that's the reason that we've changed things on Thursday night, right? At our house, it's Wednesday night, but right, the reason that we changed that, listen, we need to connect with each other. Like you shouldn't have intimate knowledge about the sins of everybody in this room, right? And nobody wants intimate knowledge of your sin, by the way, either. We all got our own problems to deal with. Right? But you should have some knowledge of what they're struggling with. Right? Of what's actually going on in their lives. You should know something beyond just being able to recognize them across a crowded room and go, oh, that person goes to church with me, right? Like there's got to be more connection than that in church. I think the early church probably ate meals in each other's homes. I think they cared for each other's needs. I think they were living their faith out every day in community with each other. Right? Proverbs chapter 27, verse 17, right, tells you iron sharpeneth iron, right? So a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friends. Right? When you actually have community, right? When you actually are connecting with other people in this room, it makes you a better Christian. And not connecting with people in this room will dull your blade. right? It makes you more dull as a Christian. You begin to lose the fire. You begin to lose the heat of your faith. The more that you keep yourself at an arm's distance from everybody, right? Listen, it is absolutely. It's not just right in church, right here, right? I've been in church for a long time, but it is amazing to me, right? Over the course of my time in Christianity, I've attended a lot of Christian events. I have watched people attend Christians events, and they can isolate themselves in a room of 200 people. Right? They can sit by themselves. They can ignore everybody else. They can be just a part of their own little thing. They cannot want, like, and literally when you approach them, you can tell, like, look, I don't want to talk to you. I am here to check a box and say I attended. So please just leave me alone, right? And let me be. I'm trying to, right? I'm trying to complete my good Christian week. Right? But that's not what church is. Right? When the scripture tells you that iron sharpens iron, it means this. It means, you know what happens when, as friendships challenge each other? It's not a genuine friendship. If you can't challenge your friend without them turning around, walking out, abandoning you forever, that's not a friendship. Right? You're able to challenge the other individual. You're able to challenge the other individual, come to the conclusion that you agree about it, and move past it. Every person sitting in here has friends, right, with whom they disagree. You may have like a different sports team, right? I was talking to somebody last night, and they said, well, I'm a Canucks fan. I said, well, that's the end of that. I don't know how anybody can be a Vancouver Canucks fan, right? But but listen, right? You don't have to all like the same things in order to have a friendship, right? But friendships are challenging. Some of us, all we're trying to do is just avoid actually having to come out of our shell, right? And listen, I get it. Some of you are introverts, right? And some people are extroverts, right? You say, well, I'm an introvert, so therefore I just don't like it. Well, maybe you're an introvert, right? Or maybe, right, you're just trying to actually avoid connecting with anybody, because if you do connect with somebody, they might get past the service and they might realize, right, you might realize that there's things in your life that, man, aren't going straight, and there's things in their lives that aren't going straight. And you know what you might find out? You might find out that you're not the only one that has problems, and then you won't be able to have these little pity parties that you like to sit around and have for yourself because you think you're the only one who's struggling with anything in your life. And so you can go home and you can talk about, well, you know, nobody else gets how hard it is to be me and how hard it is to be where I'm at and struggle with the things that I've struggled with. No, maybe there's lots of other people that know that. And maybe if you came alongside people that are like that and that know those type of struggles, you might find some strength from it, and you might actually crawl out of the hole every once in a while. Right? Church has to be more. Right? The way that you sharpen a knife, right, is via friction. That's literally how it works, right? You take that knife and you use another piece of metal to sharpen it with, and the friction between those two is what brings that knife to a point. And that's what makes you listen, it sharpens you just, if you forget even about faith and Christianity for a second. If you don't have friendships that challenge you, you are a dull individual. You are a dull person. If your opinions, your thoughts are never challenged by anybody, you're a dull person. If nobody can challenge you without you losing your mind, you're a dull individual. You're not beneficial. Right? Listen, every person sitting in here, you should have friends that aren't Christians. You know why? Because it's good to be sharpened up every once in a while. To have somebody lay a question on you that you go, oh, how do I deal with that? How do I address that? I've never actually, right, had it come at me from that point of view before. And that's, by the way, that's what's supposed to happen in here as a church as well. We're not all supposed to be monogamous and all look exactly the same. It's not one monolith in here. Sorry, monogamous. You better be monogamous. Good Lord. Right. But it's not supposed to be one monolith, right? Where we all look the same, act the same. Me and Sarah were in Vegas to go to the concert and stuff, and so we were there for the weekend, and we went to some ice cream shop called Freddy's something or the other. And we're fixing to walk out, and we walk past this table, and there's 4 people sitting at it, husband, wife. And I told her as we walked past them, I was like, that's 2 independent fundamental Baptist couples talking right there. Right? It was like you could tell 100%, right? And I'm not saying that that's all bad, but listen, we're not all supposed to look the same, act the same, have the exact same tastes in everything. You don't have to like all the music that I like. In fact, I promise you, you won't like all the music I like. I've got a really wide range, right? But listen, the reality is that stuff is what sharpens us, right? You've got to be challenged to be sharpened. Listen, ask you this, right? Obviously, I don't expect an answer, but just think about it for a second, right? Who in your life challenges you enough to sharpen you up? Is there anybody in your life that challenges you enough to sharpen you? That makes you actually have to sit and think to yourself, well, other than just saying, well, I disagree, do I have an actual argument against this? Right? Do I really, I know what I think, right? I know what I believe, but aside from saying, well, I just don't believe that, do I actually have a logical defense for what I do believe about this? Listen, that's what church is supposed to do. That's what us being in community as a church is supposed to do. There's a danger in surface level attendance. Whether you want to believe this, all you do, right? I'm not saying you got to talk in every conversation that's ever had or you got to answer every question that's ever asked. But there is a danger in deciding, well, I'm not talking about nothing. And I'm not letting anybody past the mask, right? Danger in that. The Bible tells us, right? Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 and verse 25 tell you, let us consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as we see the day approaching. You know what Hebrews warns you to do, right? He doesn't say, hey, make sure that you guys all show up in the same building, the same day of the week, for the same amount of time. No, he tells you to consider. Consider one another, he tells you. Let us consider one another. Let's think about this, he tells you, right? Let's stir each other up, he tells you, right? Surface level church life is very dangerous. If this is the sum total of your church life, your spiritual life with the people sitting in this room is just your attendance, you are spiritually dry. You may not want to admit it right now, but you are and you know it. If you're honest and you look yourself eye to eye in the mirror, you know you're spiritually dry. There's nothing going on. When you don't share this life with others, what begins to happen is your passion begins to fade. I grew up in Alberta, right? I was a Calgary Flames fan, right? I watched the games, to the point where I still remember some of the longest games man ever played, staying up to watch those games go into 6 and 7 overtimes. I remember going to watch the Calgary Flames get off the plane after they won the Pacific Division. Right? I remember that. I mean, I was impassioned as a Flames. nearness and other people that were fans just like I was. But it doesn't take very long. In Alberta in a long time. I still consider myself a Flames fan, but I don't remember the last game I really was passionate about. I'm passionate about the Reign now. You know why? Because I will go and watch them all the time. Right? But if this is all you do, this is it, right? You're here, and you're listening, right? But there's no discussion about what you've heard. In that, right, in a few minutes we'll dismiss, right? We're going to try and have conversations about what we're talking about, is because if that's all you're doing is you're just taking it in. There's no connection between you and the other people in this room. And there needs to be that connection, right? It doesn't take long to stop feeling the heat, right? Not only that, you begin to be lonely, right? And the struggles that you have just get buried. And if some of us sitting in this room right now, if we're honest with each other, you know that's exactly the way that it is for you. You know that's exactly the way that it is. Nobody else in here knows what you're struggling with. And there was a time when you could have said something, but now it's gone on so long and you've buried it so deep that to try to expose it now, right? It's impossible. Because you put on such a good face and you put on such a great mask, and now to pull the mask off would make you look like a liar. And looking like a liar sucks. Right? But imagine, right? Listen, you can say whatever you want, but I think every person on the face of this planet, you know what they desperately want? They desperately want somebody to be able to actually see them with all their problems and still go, it's cool. We'll work it out. And I'll tell you this, right? As long as I'm the pastor of this church, right? That's the way it'll be. You won't get run out of here because you got problems. I promise you that. Right? Not that, right? There won't be conversations or whatever, but I'm not going to run you out because you got an issue. This is the one place where you're supposed to be able to come and find the solution, right? The one place where you're supposed to be able to come and be completely honest. Listen, every person wants that, and you know it's lonely, right? Whatever your hidden problem is, there's nothing more lonely than when it rears its head in your life. You feel completely alone because who are you going to talk to about it? Who are you going to talk to about it? No one. Because you're scared to death that if you ever do talk to somebody about it, they're going to hate you. They're going to spread it all over the place. Listen, this should be the one place where that's not a concern. The reality is that, right, I'm not trying to get you to say, well, let me tell you what I did all the sins I committed this week, right? That's not the point. The sin is not the problem. Listen real close. The sin's not the problem. The sin is a symptom of the problem. Right? I'll give you a perfect example, right? If you struggle with pornography is not the problem. You got a lust life that's out of control. Your lust is the issue, and your lust is what needs to be dealt with. I don't need to sit down across the table from you and you say, well, I watched pornography 6 out of 7 days this week, right? But you could possibly sit down across the table from somebody, right, and say, so I'm struggling with lust. I can tell you one of my big ones is greed. I like money. I like it a lot. All right? I'm pretty decent at making it. Right? And I can sell myself full sail into just doing business and making money if I'm not careful and forget that God's called me to be a pastor too. Right? I got lust problems like everybody else has, right? But listen, you're supposed to be able to like sit down across the table, not just generally say it, but you're supposed to be able to sit down across the table from somebody and say, hey, look, I got lust problems. Would you pray with me? Can you help me out? Right? Listen, the other thing that happens, the other danger to it is you don't have accountability. No accountability always leads to big problems. No accountability means very shallow roots. Shallow roots get blown over. You know what you need? You need somebody who goes, hey, what happened last Sunday? You do need that, right? I'm not saying every single time that you miss, somebody needs to show up at your door, right, before church service is over and go, whoa, what happened to you, you little sinner? Right? But, right? But you do need accountability. You do need somebody who, after you've been absent from service a couple weeks, goes, hey, what's going on? Like, shouldn't you be more faithful? Like, isn't this where it's at? Right? That accountability matters. Galatians 6:1-2 tells us, brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, you which are spiritual, restore such an one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. Bear you one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. I'm going to, let's see, what time do I got? I got 2 minutes, so. Listen, God has a design for the church, right? God's design for the church is very specific, right? He says in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 25 and verse 26, that there should be no schism in the body, but that the members should have the same care one for another. Whether one member suffer, all members suffer with it. Or one member be honored, all members rejoice with it. The church is supposed to be a body in Scripture. It's not a crowd. It's different. It's a big difference between being able to gather a big crowd and having a body of believers. Right? In a body, every part matters, every part's needed, and if one part is hurting, then the rest of the body feels it. And as believers, we're instructed to bear one another's burdens. You realize that's not an optional thing, it's a command in Scripture. Spiritual maturity is reached in relationship with other believers, not isolated from relationships with other believers. Listen, this is one of the dangers of a lot of things, right, that I hear and see preached is the concept that, right, well, you just need to avoid anybody that does anything wrong. Right? Just stay away. Well, if that's going to be the way that you go about your Christian life is going to be very isolated, because let me tell you something, there's nobody sitting in this room right now that lives up to my level of spirituality. Right? And you know why we all kind of go about that? Because that's exactly how all the rest of us feel too. Ain't nobody in here living up to your level of spirituality. Well, if they really love Jesus, they wouldn't have said anything to me about that. If they really love Jesus, they wouldn't wear that. If they really love Jesus, they wouldn't act like that. They wouldn't have said that. Right? It's amazing how we give ourselves a pass, right? Listen, growth comes when every joint, right, in the body is well formed and working together, which is exactly what Ephesians tells us. Right, so I'd say this, right? You should not settle for just sitting in church. You shouldn't settle for it. John chapter 13, verse 34 and verse 35. Right? He tells us, a new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. But by this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another. Isn't it amazing that Christ didn't say, here's how people will know that you're my disciples? They'll know you're my disciples by the music you listen to. They'll know that you're my disciples by the number of times you go to church in a week. Not saying that neither one of those things is important. I'm just saying that's not what we're supposed to be marked by. They'll know you're my disciples by the way that you dress or the haircut that you have. He says, they'll know you're my disciples. You know how they'll know? Because you love each other. See, that's what marks this thing. That's what's supposed to mark your Christian life and my Christian life. So I'll ask you this question, right? And then we're going to dismiss and let the teens bail, and I'm going to ask a couple of questions and stand up here in silence while nobody answers. But, right? But let me ask you this, right? How can you say that you love the other people in this room if you don't know them? And I don't mean that you don't know about them or you don't know of them. I mean, you don't know them. You can't love somebody you don't know. It's by knowing them that you love them. This should be the one place on the face of this planet where you can walk in, right, and say, hey, look, right, I'm having struggles, right, with whatever, right? Man, I really don't, I don't know if I'm losing my mind, right, or my faith, but I'm not sure that I'm all in this thing anymore. It should be the one place where you can say things like that and people go, okay, well, let's talk about that then. Right? Let's talk about this. Christianity has become a community of silence. We don't tell each other what our struggles are because we've mistakenly told the wrong people before and got stabbed in the back. I've been stabbed in the back too. Right? Most of us sitting in this room have been stabbed in the back at some point, right? It sucks, right? So don't do it to somebody else. Since you know what it feels like to be stabbed in the back, maybe make a determination. You know what? I'm still going to be open, and I'm going to still talk with people, but man, I'd never stab somebody in the back like I got stabbed in the back. That's what this is supposed to be. It's supposed to be more than just a seat. We'll talk a little bit more about it next week. We're going to go ahead and break up. So teens, you can head out that way. I've sent it to you, right? Yeah. Okay. You're not going to make it through it all? Probably not. Yeah, I know. I'm pretty much on time, though, for about what we wanted anyway. So some of these questions are fairly repetitive, but why do you think that you can regularly attend church, right, and still feel disconnected or feel lonely even in a room full of people? Some of you have been coming to this church for a long time. And if you were honest, you'd still say, you know what, I feel lonely, right? I don't feel connected with the people in this room. Why is that? Somebody give me something. Yeah. 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 All the good times. No, that's true, right? Like we all kind of live. We all live in our. There's a guy that wrote a book actually about the way that people do life now, and his point was right. Like our garage door is now our moat. You know, like that thing protects us from everybody. You know, we drive into our garage. Most of us never even see our neighbors. You know, and so it has become that way, and even church has become that way. What are some barriers that? Well, right. What are some barriers that keep people from being able to form deeper relationships at church? I'll give you one from my own experience, right? And that is, if right, church people can be insanely judgmental, right? Like a different level of judgmental, right? Like to the point where like I could pretty much, right? I've had my time with running from God. Me and God haven't always got along, right? So, right, I could go to the bar, sit down at the bar, and talk to people, and I could unload everything on them. I mean, I could trauma dump, right? they'd take it on the chin, right? And they go, huh, right? Like, sounds like your life sucks. Let me get you a beer. Right? But that's not true in church, right? I can tell you one reason, right? Like what I think that is, right? I think we always think we got to solve it instead of just listening to it. Right? Like you don't always have to solve, right, everybody's problem. Like sometimes it's enough just to sit and say, you know what? Yeah, like sounds like your life sucks, right? Like sounds like things aren't going your way. Let's see. There's one. Who's someone that you feel like has sharpened your faith, made you more committed, right? In your life, in church, wherever. Right? Yeah. For me, it was well, one of the key ones, right? I've told you guys before, was Pastor Scudder in Vallejo, because when I was coming back to we're separated, and then we got back together, and we were living in Vallejo. Like he would just, right? He'd walk around we lived in a little apartment complex, and it had a little cul-de-sac, and he'd walk around in that little cul-de-sac while I smoked a cigarette to prove that, you couldn't tell me what to do. Right? And he'd just walk around the cul-de-sac, and he'd, so what, like, what are you going to do, right? Like, are you going to be the father? You're like, is this the father you want your kids to have? And stuff like that. He'd ask me questions, and, but I knew this. I knew Brother Scudder loved me. Right? He was willing to ask me some pretty hard questions, right? Like put the screws to me about some stuff, but he loved me. Right? I never doubted whether he loved me. And so that was one of the people that did it for me. Anybody else want to answer that one before we move on? Yes, sir. Yeah. 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 Well, I told right, like it's not even always just people, right? Like we went and watched when that Jesus Revolution movie came out. Sarah or Allison's friend was actually in that movie. He's in the beach scene in the movie, and so it's actually his big old head. Anthony's big old head shows up on the screen for about 2 seconds. So I used to tell him, I was like, oh, now that you're a big movie star and everything, but Anthony's a good kid. But so we went and watched that Jesus Revolution movie, right? I don't agree with everything that took place during the course of the Jesus Revolution and, right, the rise of Calvary Chapel and all that kind of stuff. But there were things about that I thought to myself, like, yeah, right, like some of this stuff, right, like you do have to, right, think about like, okay, like, right, like that was a whole different, like a real cultural shift, right, the hippies. And the Summer of Love and stuff. I mean, that was a severe cultural shift, right? And I'm not saying that the church was all wrong or anything else, but I don't think that the church was all right either in how it dealt with it. Yeah, yep, yeah. So, but there's at one point in the movie, right, um, one of the characters says to the guy that's playing Chuck Smith, right? He says, like, my people came to you, right? And you guys wouldn't let us in because we didn't have shoes on, and stuff. Right? I'm not saying that, right, all the churches should have just, let whatever happen. It's not the point, right? But sometimes, right, we can put up barriers that don't belong there, right? Or that right are at least they're movable barriers, right? There are barriers, right? They're not scriptural necessarily, right? Now we may have a scriptural principle and say, well, yeah, but this principle ties to that, and that may be, but there's other ways to address that principle sometimes too. And so I think those are things that have sharpened me over time too. Uh, how does having hidden struggles, right, or loneliness, how does that affect your walk with God? Right. Yeah. Uh, you ever had a hidden struggle that you were sure people were found out about? Uh, right. Uh, go, I can tell you how it goes in my life, right? Usually it goes something like this, right? The person doesn't call me for a couple of weeks, and then I go, oh, they must have found out. Uh, may not be how it works for you. I'm just telling you how it works for me. Uh, right? Well, I guess they know, right? And then they call you like, 2 days later, and they've got, about anything, right? So, uh, but it does. Listen, first of all, loneliness affects everybody, right? We live in a world that feels more alone right now than probably maybe at any time in history, even though people are supposedly more connected, right? There's a lot of psychology and books out there about it right now. But we do live in a world that feels very alone. One of the reasons I think the world feels very alone is like we don't discuss anything except for the weather and politics, right? Like whenever we get together, like that's about all anybody talks about anymore. Like nobody really goes like, hey, like, I'm really struggling with this, or I'm having a problem with that, or like not even work problems, right? Like most people won't even talk about problems that are going on at their work and how they should deal with those, right? Because we think to have problems means to be weak, and yet the strongest people that we know of, go ahead. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Uh, I think sometimes like it's legitimate on our side too that we isolate it because, right? Like we've been in the situation where we've been exposed before, right? And being exposed, it didn't go like it should have gone, right? Like when when somebody's sin is exposed to you, right? Like your reaction to it should be to embrace it, right? Not the sin, but to embrace them, right? Like, look, like we all got problems, right? Like we can work our way through this. Like there's no reason that this should stand in between us, right? That's the way that should go. But that's right. All of us had had the experience where like it got exposed, and the person was like, "Whoa, like I got to distance myself from that. I don't want to be accused of the same thing you're doing, you know." And that should not be the way that that goes. Yes. Uh, yeah. Yeah, I agree. COVID definitely isolated people, and put people. It made people in their minds believe they're self-sufficient, right? Uh, and yeah, yeah, everybody's out to get you. That's very true. There's a guy that I listen to, and one of the things that he says, like on, like this, especially on this, hidden struggles and stuff like that, right? Is how many times, right? Have you got caught doing something wrong, and then the person, right, comes out maybe too aggressive or whatever, right? But they're very accusatory, right? Does it make you go, yeah, you're right, I was wrong, right? Let me fix it. Or when they do that, do you immediately start to figure out why it wasn't your fault, right? And you start to like shuffle cards and hide it like deeper, you know? Uh, and listen, as Christians, right? Like that attack, right? Of like, oh, that was wrong. I'm going to let you have it now, right? Like, yeah, all that does is push that thing down deeper in somebody's life. Makes it harder for them to deal with, and it makes it harder for the relationship you have with that person, right? As opposed to like, okay, right? Like, listen, I'm not saying, right, like I've sat and had people say things to me, right, in like when talking to them, that is pretty shocking sometimes, right? But you can't, but right, the key is, right, like, yeah, right, some things are shocking when you find them out. That is what it is. But you need to embrace that person. Because I'll tell you this, you have never loved anybody too much. And you've never shown anybody too much grace. You know how I know that? Because it's never happened in my life. If you think you've loved somebody too much or you've given somebody too much grace, just answer this question. Has somebody loved you too much and given you too much grace? Has that happened for you yet? Right? You're not the superstar you think you are, right? We'll do one more question here and then we'll dismiss. Let's see. What does it mean to you, right, that the Bible calls the church a body and not a crowd? Yeah, right. It's right. Me and Sarah went to Boots in the Park, right? There was probably what 10,000 people in that park, at least. All right. Didn't feel like, all right, like, oh wow, we're just surrounded by so much warmth and love, a lot of pot and alcohol, but I had the munchies when I left. I'll tell you that. So, but no, but right, but being there, right, like being just because there was a lot of people there didn't make it feel like we were connected, right? That's church too, right? Just because we're all here doesn't mean we're connected. The connection takes place when like we actually like dig into each other's lives, right? And you can only dig into somebody's life obviously as much as they will allow you to. But people will allow you to dig into their lives more than you think they will. You just have to hang in there, right? And be there through all of the stonewalling, right? And just give it time. Like, hey, you know what? Like, I'm here. When you need somebody to talk to, like, I'll be here, right? And you got to keep that up until they actually start to feel like, oh, like, you might actually care, right? It's kind of like if you've ever dealt with mountain people or beach people, all right? Mountain people and beach people are two different types of community. If you're not a part of their community and you move in, you're not a part of their community. Takes a while, right? They wait. They want to see whether like, are you really staying, right? Eventually you can become a part of the mountain community or the beach community, but it doesn't start that way, right? It takes time. And it's the same way in the church world, right? You can be a part of each other's lives, but it takes time, right? It takes continual effort on your part, even when they are not interested, right? Like, hey, you want to go out to dinner? No. All right. Wait a couple weeks and hit them again, right? Eventually they'll say, hey, you know what, like, right? People are waiting to see whether you are being genuine, whether you really want to connect with them or not, or whether you're just trying to find out what their secrets are. All right? All right, we'll dismiss. We'll be back in here in about 10 minutes.